On episode 253 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Danielle Capalino and discuss her book, The Microbiome Diet Plan. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/253. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Our guest today runs a private practice in New York City where she provides nutrition counseling services with a specialty in digestive health. She's a registered dietitian with degrees from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and MIT. She's also the author of Healthy Gut, Flat Stomach. But today we're going to talk about her book, The Microbiome Diet Plan. My guest today, and I'm pleased to welcome Danielle Capalino. So Danielle, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I've talked briefly, occasionally, a little bit about the microbiome. So when I saw your book, The Microbiome Diet Plan, I was like, yeah, that's what I need to do because, I really want to take a little bit more time to talk about the microbiome and how important it is. It's becoming kind of really the hot thing, one of the hot things in health science. So again, really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Yes, I'm excited to share more about the microbiome with you and your listeners today.
And one of the other cool things is there's some really great recipes in here. I tried your beef and mushroom lettuce wraps. Oh, I guess mushroom and beef.
Okay, good. You skipped right to phase 2, but that's okay.
I know. We're going to talk about the phases too. And as I was kind of, going through the book and thinking, okay, this is really, really good from a structure perspective. There's no guesswork here in the way you've put this together. And like I said, when we start talking about the structure later, which I do want to get into, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So yeah, I did just kind of skip and cherry pick a recipe to prepare, and it was simple. And again, I'm going to try your ketchup, and I am going to try that cranberry stuff. I've already put a note on my calendar to remind me to make that before I go up to my mother's for Thanksgiving. So.
Oh, awesome. I'm so impressed. I can't believe it.
Okay. So now as we get into this, let's just take a step back and let's talk about what is the microbiome and why is it important to us?
So the microbiome is actually a fancy term for the collection of mostly bacteria, but other microorganisms as well that live all over us and inside of us. So yes, we are covered in bacteria, also some viruses, also some other microorganisms, but mostly bacteria, and that's what the focus is on because that's what most of the research is on. So, we were raised to think bacteria is bad and we should always wash our hands and get rid of the bacteria. But it turns out that this bacteria, especially the bacteria that lives inside of our intestinal tract, actually serves a wide range of really important functions for our body. So some of the things that are gut bacteria or our microbiome, I can kind of use those terms interchangeably here, are helping us maintain a healthy weight, maintaining our immune system, helping us to produce certain vitamins and absorb certain fibers. So it turns out bacteria can be our friends, can be good for us, and really vital for our health.
So now I know we basically do a few things that really we intend to be healthy when we're doing them, but they turn out kind of not being so healthy for us. And I think one of the things I'd like to get into a little bit is obviously we get sick and we're going to go to the doctor and we're going to ask for antibiotics. Can you talk a little bit about antibiotics?
Sure. There's definitely, and by the way, I think I didn't mean to give washing your hands.
No. Please do wash your hands. But it's just, that cleanliness aspect. And I think, and some of the things, and I'll talk in a minute, is they talk about we used to be in the dirt. We used to dig for our food. We used to farm and pick and be in the dirt and be dirty. And that was part of the development of, as a human race, was to be able to survive with that and actually become symbiotic with that. And so, yeah, wash your hands, but don't be afraid to get a little bit of dirt on you.
Exactly. That's really what I meant. But along the lines of what you're asking about antibiotics, I will just say there have been ingredients that are taken out of antibacterial soaps as well and taken off the market in the past few months. And it's kind of for a similar reason that we shouldn't be jumping to take antibiotics. There's definitely, absolutely a time and a place to take antibiotics if you have a bacterial infection that is going to respond to antibiotics. But this day and age, really all over the world, antibiotics are just given out like candy to some degree and given when we don't need them. What can happen is that basically antibiotics do not discriminate. So if you have a pathogenic or a bad bacteria that you need to take an antibiotic for, if you're taking the right medication, it'll kill the bad bacteria, but it will also kill good bacteria alongside of it. So sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, you should take a probiotic if you're taking antibiotics. And that's why, because, we're taking this time and effort to build up a healthy microbiome and healthy bacteria, but then, a round of antibiotics kills everything in its path.
And I think one of the reasons I think that's really important is that even if you do take the probiotics, there's really only a few strains in there. And while you do have to be very careful that they're strong enough, they have enough, what is it, count in the billions, right? Is that's only a few strains. And in fact, we have hundreds, if not thousands of strains, and they all work symbiotically inside us. So providing 2 or 3 strains, while they're beneficial, it's not all the strains that you need to be healthy. And we really haven't even worked out the math yet on how many and what the right ratio of those are yet.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Okay. Now, in the book, and I'm a freak for lists, so you give me a list, I'm going to want to talk about it. But this is a very good list because this is kind of the guidelines for managing your microbiome. And I think it's very important because it really just concisely puts it together in a way that I think is very easy for us to communicate. So could you kind of go through the guidelines that you have in the book?
Sure. So the focus of this book is to basically take all of the research that has been done on the microbiome, all the research that's been done looking at gut bacteria and what type of gut bacteria has been associated with health. So across the studies, what you'll find is that people have a healthier gut bacteria and are generally healthier when they eat high fiber diets. So for that reason, the first guideline is choosing high fiber carbohydrates. So we want to make sure there's lots of whole grains, beans, fruits, and vegetables. The next guideline along the same lines is to eat more plants. Part of the reason we want to eat more plants is because of the same reason that plants, meaning, fruits and vegetables mostly, they have very high fiber content and our gut bacteria love that. So I'm going to introduce a new term in here right now, which is prebiotic. So bear with me for a second. There are a lot of new words here, but probiotics is a word people are more familiar with. Probiotics are actually live bacteria. So when we're talking about our gut bacteria, probiotics are typically a term that we use when we're talking about a supplement or something that's added in food. But really what probiotics are live bacteria that give you a health benefit. So on the other hand, there's also prebiotics. Prebiotics are like superfood for your bacteria. So prebiotics are the food that the bacteria that are living in your intestines, in your gut microbiome, those are the foods that they want to eat. It's like fast food for your gut bugs. And unlike fast food that we like, which is typically junk food, the foods that our bacteria like are actually really healthy foods. So those are foods also that are really high in fiber and made from plants. Also on this list of guidelines are fermented foods. So fermented foods are foods that will naturally have probiotic bacteria. And so these are foods like pickles when they're made in the traditional way, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, and the list goes on. But there are also really delicious foods, and there are lots of recipes in the book incorporating them. So to kind of go along with eating more plants, another thing on the list of guidelines is limiting your meat intake. And so that's why I was giggling in the beginning when you said that you tried a beef recipe, is because even though it's totally legitimate, it's totally...
Let's be fair. When you do the beef recipe, though, I like a good burger. And I think a lot of people do. And when you're talking about something that's generally, not restrictive, but what we're doing here is we're cutting back on the total amount of beef I'm eating because I'm matching it with as much, if not just a little bit more, volume of mushrooms. And so in the end, I got a lot less beef than if I had made myself that same burger with just hamburger. I would have gotten twice as much beef on that burger than I did, which means that my meat budget just went crazy because I can store the rest of that away, and that's going to make multiple meals out of the hamburger I bought because I'm matching it with the mushrooms that cost a lot less per pound.
Yes, exactly. I like that term both for the monetary and also for the nutritional perspective, meat budget. That's I'm going to borrow that one. But you'll find, and we'll talk about the different phases of how this diet works, but in general, you want to limit your meat intake. So it doesn't need to be an overall no meat, but it's actually fascinating because people will talk about how eating a lot of meat is not good for your heart, but have been unclear about necessarily how that happens. And there's new research coming out, which I just think is so cool, interesting, basically that there is a pathway kind of mediated by bacteria. So we'll eat meat and then our bacteria will break that down and produce a compound that has been shown to clog your arteries. So it's pretty wild stuff. And as a result, limiting meat intake is one of the guidelines here. The whole book is gluten-free as well. This might be a little bit counterintuitive, perhaps, because we've just been talking about how high fiber and whole grains are good for you. It's just that so many people who have digestive issues or have problems with gluten, so we've left it out of the book. We don't know really if gluten is particularly bad for your gut bacteria, but just keeping in mind the audience of people who are interested in this book, we've left gluten out of the picture. So if you find that it's not a problem for you, you can reintroduce gluten-containing whole grains into your diet. We also avoid sugar, not only sugar, but also fake sugar. I think a lot of people are able to sneak around the issue of avoiding sugar by having sugar alternatives, but I'm really kind of anti both of them. And if I'm being really honest, if I had to pick one, I think fake sugar is even worse than real sugar. And it's really wild. There's research showing that artificial sweeteners can cause blood sugar spikes just the same way that real sugar does, and can even cause type 2 diabetes. So you are not doing yourself any favors with sugar substitutes. So this diet in this book does not have any sugar substitutes. Also does not have any food additives. So there's some additives that have become more and more prevalent in our foods that just can have a very detrimental effect on our gut bacteria. So those are excluded, and we have a list in here of some particular food additives that have been studied that we should avoid. Also, I include cultured dairy products. That kind of goes along the lines of fermented foods. They're cultured dairy products or dairy products that are naturally fermented. So that would be like yogurt, kefir. There's some other cultured dairy products that you might find popping up in the stores, but those are the main ones that are included in the recipes in this book. And finally, a question that I get a lot is, can you drink alcohol on this plan? So yes, you can drink alcohol. So far, I've written 2 books, and you can drink alcohol with both of them. So got to give the readers something. So yes, just being moderate, limiting alcohol intake. It's not off limits, but just, as usual, consuming in moderation.
And thinking about also the kind of the quality of what you're drinking as well, because it goes through through a lot of the processing. In many cases, there's gluten, there's other things in the alcohol, depending on how it's put together, what it is. So you do have to kind of take those other rules into account as you're looking at the alcohol and not having the added sugars and syrups and all the other stuff.
100%. You were absolutely right. Once again.
Okay. So now, because I did skip away to phase 2, and I apologize for that.
Oh, no. I was just kidding.
The plan is broken into 2 phases, which I like, and it's a 6-week program, which I also like, because I think a lot of times when we start talking about our gut and changing our health is that, a lot of the books, they want to be, I guess, they say kind of reachable or attainable. And so they say, well, you can do this in 3 weeks or you can do this in 4 weeks. And to me, I think if they commit to phase 1 on this, which is the 3 weeks, and see how you've put this together, then they're going to see how easy it is for them to just continue and just complete the 6 weeks. And by that time, they should see the results. I mean, if they've followed through with each of the principles that you have and they've looked at what you've put together for a program here, I mean, it's just, you made it easy. It's right there, So can you kind of talk about your program, how you put it together, why it is structured the way it is, and then each of the pieces, because I don't want to give it all away in asking my question. But no, really, I liked the way it was, and it was so well structured that I just think that if you don't have to think, and that's for a lot of people, they're busy, decision fatigue, frustration, you've made it very easy for them to comply.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out as well. Credit to the publisher for making my lists on Microsoft Word turn into these really user-friendly lists. It makes quite a difference. So I think I'm very happy with how it looks. So as you said, there's 2 phases. Each phase lasts for 3 weeks, and it kind of goes back to just the principles that I was talking about. So in both of the phases, the diet is rich in fermented foods, so that kind of pickles, kimchi, sauerkraut that I was talking about, as well as fermented dairy products like the kefir yogurt. One thing I'll just point out really quickly is that I say pickles are good. That doesn't mean that necessarily all pickles that you buy are good for you. You have to be a savvy shopper or ferment your own foods. But when you're buying something like pickles or sauerkraut, you need to look at the labels. If it's made with vinegar, it's actually not been fermented. It tastes very similar, so you wouldn't be able to necessarily tell by taste. But if it's made with vinegar, it's not fermented. And if it's not fermented, that means it doesn't have the probiotics or the good bacteria in it. So that's just one big thing that I would point out if you're incorporating these fermented foods into your diet. I was talking about sugar and artificial sugar and how they both have detrimental effects on your gut bacteria. So those are not part of this diet. Of course, it can be difficult to just eliminate sugar from your diet. So you might be a little...
No, but your recipes they do have some sweet foods. And normally I would not eat ketchup, but you're not making store-bought ketchup. You're making ketchup using a date, which is going to provide a little bit sweetness. It's not going to be as sweet as the store-bought ketchup might be. But one of the things I found when I finally gave up sugar and the artificial sweeteners was that my palate readjusted.
How long did it take you, though, to kind of, did you have a few days where you didn't want to get out of bed?
Well, with the sugar, yes. And then, yes, well, I didn't do them both at the same time.
Yeah, that was smart.
Readily true. And I'm like, okay, I'll give up the sugar and I'll get past that. And I knew, there would be some carb flu kind of stuff, and I knew I would go through that withdrawal period, and I did, but it wasn't as bad because I'm still drinking the diet beverages. And so I'm still getting that sweet kick. I'm getting it from something that doesn't have the calorie load. And then what I found when I said, okay, now I'm going to give up these Diet Cokes. And, people say they drink a lot of Diet Cokes. No, I have you beat because I really have you beat. Anyway, I was going to get off of them, and I knew that I was going to have caffeine issues. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start drinking coffee. And black coffee, anybody that just tries to go straight into black coffee will tell you that it's vile. So what I would do is I'd get a piece of fruit, like a peach or an apple, and I would sit there and I'd bite that apple, and then I would take a sip of the coffee. And, no, they're not really matching flavors that you would think, but it was enough sweetness to cut the coffee to where I could get the caffeine that I needed to make it through the day. And then what I just started doing was slowly doing less and less of the fruit. And over the course of about 2 weeks, just trained myself to drink black coffee, and I was off of all the sweeteners.
Wow, that's so interesting and how clever of you.
Well, there wasn't any other way for me to drink it. I'm sitting there like, there's fruit, and I don't want to put sugar in this because I got off of sugar. I'm like, there's fruit, which I feel okay about, and, eating a little. So if I have a little bit of there sitting there with breakfast, and I just want to do a little and get the flavor in my mouth and then drink the coffee, it worked. And then I just, like I said, over the course of about 2 weeks, toned down to not getting the fruit anymore. And now I'm black coffee.
Kudos to you. That's a really creative and totally clever idea that you had. It sounds like it worked. That's awesome.
And I'm a big proponent of pay attention to how your mind and body work, because, while I say that works perfectly for me, that might not be the best approach to you too. It might just be that you can taper down on the Diet Cokes, taper down on the artificial sweeteners, and that might work. For me, I knew that with the artificial sweeteners, particularly with the Diet Coke, I just had to quit. It was either quit or I was going to start back. So I just know myself well enough to know that I had to be all in for that, or it just wasn't going to happen. Same thing with the sugar. I just had to be all in. So it's just kind of that, which, the cool thing about your book and the way you've got this structured is that there's complete shopping lists here. And literally they go in and, you're sweetening things with natural things, like I said, like the dates and honey and things like that, but very little of it. So that the effect is, while you're getting a slightly sweet taste, it is still going to work for you. And at first it might seem a little odd, I think, but then over time it'll get easier and easier, and then you won't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah. So the way that it's structured, there's kind of two main differences between the phases. One is that in the first phase, there's just really no added sugar at all. And in the second phase, as you said, there's some honey and maple syrup. The other thing is that in the first phase, there's no meat. And in the second phase, meat is added back in, but not as the main part of the meal. As you said, it becomes almost like more of a garnish than the bulk of your dish. So those are the two big differences. But, if anyone is listening to this and has bought the book, I almost want to add an addendum in of what Alan was talking about, because I love your idea. This is all about kind of going in cold turkey, but it's absolutely fine and would be great. Like if you are hooked on sugar and artificial sugar, then it's totally okay to ease your way into this.
And, I think for a lot of people, yes, it's just the struggle, the energy levels, all the things that go on. On this podcast, we run regular sugar challenges where I try to get people down not to no sugar, but to at least some low level of sugar. And to a person, there's not one of them that's gone through it and said that they didn't feel better after it was over than they did before. So just cutting sugar is going to help you feel better. And so that for a lot of people, just the tapering down is going to work just fine and help them manage it. But if you're the individual that wants to go all in and you like how, you want something that's like done for you, it's a plan. It's not just a diet. It's a plan. So there's a structure. Here's your shopping list. Here's the meals. And here's some advice and tips, and I will get into that in a second, on how you can make all this work. Because, a lot of people can be like, oh, I got to cook all this food, and how am I going to do that? You actually give us some tips for that. So I want to get into that in a second. So if you want to wrap up anything on the structure of it that they should know so they kind of know what they're getting into, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just reiterate quickly exactly what you said. This is written for the person who's ready to jump in. But if you're able to follow this plan, 80% of the time, that's a success as well.
Absolutely. In the book, you do have some tips for success, and I think we'd be remiss to not mention them because they apply to just about anyone who wants to go and try something from a health perspective on eating differently. So I think a lot of your tips will really kind of resonate with just about everybody, but particularly will help someone be successful with this plan.
Yes. These tips for success that I outline here, yes, they're absolutely for anyone. They are kind of reiterating what I'm saying, that, make this work for you. There are tons of recipes in this book. There are meal plans. There are like really clear meal plans for the 6 weeks. Do you want me to talk a little bit about that now? Or
Yeah, please.
So for each of the weeks, for a list lover, it's like heaven, right? Because you have every week a shopping list, a list of snacks, a meal plan, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner, every day of the week. And then I think maybe my favorite part, which is unique, is that there's a get ahead section. So I think my two favorite things about this plan are, one, that there's this get ahead section so that it outlines certain days of the week that you can get started in preparing your meals. So it's not like you need to dedicate every Sunday to cooking all day. Now, yeah, you'll be cooking, but it's also set up to use a ton of leftovers. So you'll see, even looking at the meal plan, it'll be written out in there, leftover black bean and quinoa bowl is the page I'm looking at, leftover shirataki vegetable stir fry. So there's tons of leftovers incorporated. There are things like sort of muffins for breakfast, and you'll have those throughout the week as well. So it makes it much more doable and approachable and realistic, I think. Also affordable, because you're not making new meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week for 6 weeks, because I just don't think that's sustainable for most people.
And I agree. And I am a big proponent of the batch cooking when you can. But this, like you said, you've really kind of structured this where the volume of what you're going to make and what you've purchased is going to make multiple servings. So you're going to have this again tomorrow for lunch or something like that, which I think we all tend to do when we cook anyway. It's just, in this case, you're giving your body healthy food, and you know that what you have in your refrigerator for lunch tomorrow is healthy food.
Yeah, and it's also giving you permission to do that. So yes, we all do that anyway. And I think everyone eats leftovers, but I think writing it out this way makes you realize that, I don't know, I think it just makes it feel like you're doing the right thing rather than you're got lazy and aren't cooking another meal. And also I think a lot of people have a difficult time managing meal planning and recipe planning. As a dietitian, this is a question I get all the time. So just helping people to figure out, what is the right amount of food to make, to last this number of days, and, just scheduling your meals is something that people struggle with. So I hope that is helpful to the readers. Now, some of the other kind of tips for success in here are just, there are more recipes included in this book than are in the meal plans. So you don't have to feel, if you find there's a recipe that's in there that's something you just don't like, it's not wrong to swap it out for something else. And if you're eating out, this doesn't mean you can't eat out for the next 6 weeks. I just hope that if you are eating out, that you can kind of plan ahead and look at a menu in advance if you want to, and try to just use the principles. Just think plant-based, no sugar, less meat, to try to carry those with you as you're eating, whether it's something you're cooking or whether you're at a party or whether you're eating out for a meal. I don't want you to feel deprived, so snacking is okay. Have lots of snack ideas in here. Not skipping meals, not starving yourself for a big party. They're kind of general guidelines that I would share with anyone.
Again, there's a lot more in this book than we've covered. There's lifestyle things. There's all the great recipes. So even after you're done, there's enough recipes in here that this isn't just 6 weeks of food that you're going to end up cycling through over and over. You're going to obviously have some favorites. I know I will. And, those are these things that you can now just make them staples, and you know exactly what it's going to make and how you can use it. And it's a wonderful book. And knowing how important the microbiome is and all the things we do to damage it by eating the wrong foods, by taking antibiotics, the toxin load, gluten, and all the other things that we eat. It's just, here's an opportunity for you to do something good for yourself. And it's structured in such a way that just makes it really, really easy. You have the grocery list for the week. You literally go to the grocery store with that list and it's right there. So for me, it'd be take a picture of that page and go to the grocery store and pick the good quality foods that are on the list, and you're set for the week.
Exactly. I mean, one thing I'll say about these lists is if you look at it and it seems daunting, there's a lot of things on it, you might realize there's, particularly in the pantry staple section, some of these things are spices and things that you likely already have. I mean, some of the things you already have, they're not things you need to repurchase every week. So I don't want people to get intimidated looking at these lists. Yeah.
In all honesty, when you go to eating a lot more vegetables, you are buying more groceries. You need more vegetables to sustain you than you would with the same space of meat, because they're just not quite as, they're more nutrient dense, but they're not more physically dense. So yeah, it's going to look like you've got a lot in your cart, But when you get home and you start preparing it, you're going to have very nutritious meals and you're going to go through those vegetables really quickly.
Yes, that's true. That's true. It's just that, there's that middle section of pantry staples that has, you don't need to buy turmeric every week or a bottle of vinegar. So
turmeric's good for you. You should go through it every week.
That's true.
Okay. Well, again, Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the show. If someone wanted to learn more about you and what you're doing or to get this book, where would you like for me to send them?
I would love for anyone looking for more information to go to my website. It's just my name. It's Danielle Capalino.com. Capalino. I'm also on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram.
Well, this is going to be episode 253. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/253, and I'll have all the links and all the social media IDs that Danielle has. So again, Danielle, thank you so much for being on 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we're going to get into meal timing. Does it really matter when you eat? Until then, have a happy and healthy day.